Welcome back to GenX Horror. Today we're doing a cheeky little chronological walk through a handful of classic horror movies that in most cases spawned a handful of remakes and in others changed how we view horror in general. These are fantastic titles that some may have forgotten about, and I bet some will never ever forget. A few of my favorites are on this list, and none are obscure, but some for sure might be overlooked. We're going to be talking about some great collabs with Raimi, King, Romero, and all the titans of horror we grew up with. I also added in a bonus 90s movies from Peter Jackson that really makes you wish he would have stopped with all that Hobbit nonsense and stuck with his bad taste horror roots. Come on, 80s kids. Let's get into it.
The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there. Even Carrie White.
We're going to start with 1976's Carrie, and it's not the 2013 remake. Remember that kid in high school who got picked on way too much, and you just knew they were going to snap eventually? Well, Stephen King took that anxiety and played with it like a drum kit at an Iron Maiden concert. He blew our minds with telekinetic powers and enough period blood symbolism to make even the most rigid health class teachers everywhere uncomfortable. Poor Carrie White goes from getting pelted with tampons in the locker room to literally burning down her entire prom, and you can't tell me that isn't a relatable reaction. The film's most genius move was casting this is hard to get out, casting Sissy Spacek, who looks so genuinely vulnerable that when she finally unleashes hell, you're caught between being horrified and cheering for her. The name of the high school is Bates High, a reference to Norman Bates from Psycho in 1960, and in addition, the 4-note violin theme from Psycho is used over and over throughout the film. This Brian De Palma cinematic gold basically invented the quiet kid revenge fantasies subgenre and proved that Stephen King adaptations could actually be good, a lesson Hollywood would promptly forget for the next few decades, unfortunately. King was only paid about $2,500 for the rights to Carrie, but was super jazzed to have his first book about to be adapted, and he was super grateful.
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
The Omen came out in 1976, and it also came out in 2006. Speaking of problem children, what if I told you there was a movie where a 5-year-old is literally the Antichrist, and his nanny hangs herself at his birthday party while screaming, "It's all for you, Damien." Can you believe this is what we grew up watching? The Omen took every parent's worst fear that their kid might be evil and made it absolutely biblical. Gregory Peck spends the entire movie slowly realizing his adopted son is basically Satan's little buddy, complete with a 666 birthmark and the ability to make zoo animals lose their absolute minds. The film's $2.8 million budget was stretched wildly, creating some genuinely unsettling death scenes. That photographer's beheading still slaps, while launching a franchise that could milk the demon child concept drier than communion wine. And that analogy made me laugh as I typed it, so hype it up in the comments. Fun fact, the crew experienced so many weird accidents during filming that they started wondering if they were actually cursed. Who would have thought making a movie about the devil can come with some serious occupational hazards? Now, Peck's salary was $250,000, which was low to bring him out of retirement, but he negotiated 10% of the movie's take. And at a $60 million box office, it was Peck's biggest payday ever for a role.
This is not a human child. Make no mistake.
I'm Miss Tanner, one of the instructors.
Nice to meet you. So, you moved in here? I really didn't want to.
Suspiria came out in 1977 and again in 2018 as a remake. We're going to talk about the 1977 one by Dario Argento. And he ripped us a new one when it came to the boarding school drama concept. He created a Technicolor nightmare and enough neon lighting to power a small Italian disco. Suspiria follows Jessica Harper as she enrolls in what appears to be a pretty uppity dance academy, but is actually run by a coven of kick-ass witches who really don't like new students. And the plot is honestly secondary to the visual assault Argento unleashes. He introduces colors so saturated they practically burn your retinas, and it's paired with a soundtrack composed by Argento himself and the band Goblin that sounds like it came from a progressive punk and disco mashup. And it's stated he would blast the soundtrack on set to unnerve the actors and create this chaotic atmosphere he wanted for certain scenes. This thing was shot on Technicolor stock that was already being discontinued, giving it that otherworldly look that modern films can't replicate no matter how hard they try. Watching Suspiria is like being trapped inside a chaotic trip designed by someone who took way too much acid before art history class. And that's exactly what makes this film so brilliant.
Names which begin with the letter S are the names of snakes.
From deep space, the seed is planted.
Now we're going to flip the script a little bit because we're talking about 1978's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, not the original 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers basically posed the following question to moviegoers. What if paranoia about people acting weird was 100% justified? Donald Sutherland and his magnificent hair, I noticed this more at 52, stumble upon the terrifying realization that alien pods are replacing humans with emotionless body doubles, which could really explain a lot about the 70s, I'm not going to lie. Director Philip Kaufman played on paranoia much the same way our anxiety was the muse of Carrie, making every character question whether their friends and family are still human or just really convincing meat vegetables. And I should trademark meat vegetables. The film's masterstroke was the final scene where Sutherland reveals he's been podified with that absolutely nightmare-inducing shriek and pointing gesture that's haunted audiences for decades. And in saying that, I know that's a spoiler. This was peak trust no one cinema, arriving right when Americans were feeling pretty suspicious about authority anyway, and it proved that remakes could actually improve on their source material, and modern Hollywood could definitely take some notes here. And a few random notes on the soundscape of this film. Among the sounds used for the pod growing scene, the heartbeat came from an ultrasound recorded on his pregnant wife. The pod screams were recorded pig squeals, and the natural kind of atmospheric sounds like crickets and birds and whatnot fade as the film progresses, until only mechanical sounds like sirens and garbage trucks can be heard. And that's brilliant.
Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide?
Look, I know a 1993 clip from Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a cheat, but guys, Meg Tilly.
It all began as a summer vacation. A young family found a beautiful old house. It had secluded, spacious grounds.
Now we're going to talk about 1976's Burnt Offerings. Before Poltergeist made random suburban houses scary, Burnt Offerings was out here proving that renting the summer home in the 70s was basically signing your own death warrant. Compare that to not giving a second thought to the Airbnbs we hop from night to night today. Oliver Reed and Karen Black score an amazing deal on a super boss Victorian mansion for the summer. And if you've got that kind of cash, baby, use it. The house slowly starts influencing the family through making them increasingly violent and unstable, while somehow it becomes more beautiful and well-maintained with each terrible thing that happens. And subtly, you can see the through line start to play out. This was psychological horror at its most patient. There are no jump scares, just a slow burn of creeping dread as you watch this family basically feed their sanity to a hungry house. The film was based on a novel and perfectly captured that something's not right here kind of feeling that makes you want to check your lease agreement for any clauses about soul destruction or repurposing of your soul. Bette Davis was a riot on set apparently, and not in a good way. Davis detested Oliver Reed, referring to him as that man, and only speaking to him when they shared on-screen dialogue. After filming, she described him as possibly one of the most loathsome human beings I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. And man, she hasn't met me. She also had conflicts with Karen Black, feeling Black did not extend her an appropriate degree of respect, and that her behavior on the film set was unprofessional. That's hilarious.
Burnt Offerings.
I
fear that the only way to stop those possessed by the spirits of the book is through the act of bodily...
Now let's get into 1981's The Evil Dead. And we just covered Evil Dead 2 in our prior video that won over the most influential zombie movies, and it influenced that genre for different reasons. The Evil Dead spawned that sequel, obviously, and in this one, Sam Raimi was basically a film school kid with a Super 8 camera with the absolutely perfect idea that 5 college students in a cabin should find a book that unleashes demons. And that, of course, became the template for cabin in the woods type horror forever. Bruce Campbell's Ash Williams goes from zero to blood-covered hero as his friends get possessed one by one in creative and disturbing ways. Vegetation assault, hand mutilation, and enough fake blood to fill a swimming pool. This was shot for about $350,000 in the actual woods of Tennessee, and this thing shouldn't work, but Raimi's manic energy and genuine love for horror movie mayhem makes every low-budget limitation feel like a creative choice. Filmed in a... Oh, that's a loud plane over. Sorry about that, if you could hear it. Filmed in a real-life abandoned cabin, the property's owner granted the production crew to lease the cabin under the condition that any modifications made for filming were to be undone. The crew kept their promise, and the only thing that remained in the cabin was the fireplace that was specifically built for the film, and oddly, the only thing standing after a fire destroyed this cabin years later. The film's genius was treating its ridiculous premise with complete seriousness while delivering some of the most inventive gore effects ever achieved with basically no money. The entire production sounds like it was a labor of blood, sweat, and love by the entire cast and crew. Bruce Campbell put up his family's property in northern Michigan as collateral so that Sam Raimi not only could finish the film, but also blow it up to 35mm film, which was required for theatrical release. Raimi was so grateful for Campbell's financial contribution that he credited him as co-producer. That's pretty sweet.
Can I have a piece of toast?
An American Werewolf in London came out in 1981, and An American Werewolf in Paris came out in 1997. But we're going to go 81, obviously. John Landis decided that werewolf movies were taking themselves way too seriously and created a film that was simultaneously the funniest and most terrifying thing to happen to lycanthrope cinema since. David Naughton plays an American tourist who gets bitten by a werewolf and starts receiving visits from his increasingly decomposed best friend, who keeps suggesting offing himself as a reasonable solution to the whole turning into a monster problem. London seemed like the perfect backdrop for this, and the reason Landis chose London as the setting was because, and I quote, although that's loose, me quoting anyone, London was horror central. Home to Jack the Ripper, Jekyll and Hyde. So I wanted all that Victorian Gothic, but I also wanted to show the real London of 1981. Man, I would have loved to have seen the real London in 1981. The transformation scene remains the gold standard for practical effects, whose techniques have been copied in countless films since. And this movie perfectly balanced genuine scares with dark comedy, and it gave us both a waking nightmare and quotable one-liners. Plus, it proved that werewolf movies could be more than just hairy dudes running around forests under a full moon. Though the Piccadilly Circus rampage scene suggests maybe they shouldn't be let loose in urban areas either. David Naughton was reportedly cast because John Landis had seen him in a television commercial for Dr. Pepper. However, Naughton was later let go by Dr. Pepper because of his nude scenes in the film. But you know what? It's all for the best. Now we're going to talk about 1982's Poltergeist, and not the 2015 Poltergeist. Tobe Hooper, or maybe Steven Spielberg, depending on who you ask, looked at suburban life and said, hey, what if your house was built on an ancient burial ground, and also your TV wanted to steal your daughter? The Freeling family's perfectly normal California home becomes ground zero for supernatural chaos when little Carol Ann starts chatting with spirits through television static. Because even ghosts were early adopters of new technology back in the day. This film basically weaponized every creepy childhood fear, man. Clown dolls, dark closets, swimming pools, and yeah, television static that we all secretly thought looked suspicious anyway. With a budget of $10.7 million, Spielberg and his team created some genuinely impressive practical effects that still hold up today, proving that sometimes the old ways are the best ways, and in some points the only ways. The film spawned 2 sequels and the infamous Poltergeist curse conspiracy, because nothing says a successful horror movie like rumors that your cast is actually being haunted by the fictional ghosts that they pretended to fight in the movie.
Coming soon.
Creepshow came out in 1982, and another Creepshow also came out in 2019. Guess what? 1982's Creepshow. Stephen King and George Romero got together and said, remember those EC comics from the 50s that your parents said would rot your brain? Let's make a movie that's exactly like that, but with way better special effects. This mad anthology film serves up 5 delicious slices of horror that range from genuinely creepy to absolutely insane. A meteor that turns people into plant food, and a Father's Day celebration that goes very, very wrong. The film's genius was embracing the comic book aesthetic completely, using vibrant colors and dramatic lighting that made every frame look like a panel ripped straight from Tales from the Crypt. This was Romero's only film to ever open at top 1, but it's also the only film he worked on that he didn't write the screenplay himself for, and that says something. With the $8 million budget and some perfect practical effects from Tom Savini, Creepshow proved that anthology horror could work in theaters and gave us some genuinely memorable moments. And that cockroach scene, I'd bet still haunts the 80s kids. It's basically comfort food for horror fans. Familiar flavors executed with just enough style and wit to keep you coming back for seconds. While he was all business in his scenes, Leslie Nielsen had a fart machine in his pocket during the shooting. He would let it go off during rehearsals, and just before director George Romero would call action, causing Ted Danson and the crew to crack up with laughter.
What would you do if you accidentally discovered the house next door was occupied by something not...
In 1985, they came out with a little movie called Fright Night. What happens when Rear Window meets vampire movies and nobody takes it seriously enough? You get Fright Night, where teenager Charlie Brewster becomes convinced his suave new neighbor Jerry Dandridge is indeed a vampire, and literally nobody believes him because Jerry looks like he stepped out of a cologne advertisement for Drakkar Noir. Remember that cologne? What about Cool Water? That's a flashback. Chris Sarandon's Jerry is the perfect 80s vampire. I mean, he's smooth, he's well-dressed, and he's absolutely lethal. While poor Charlie has to convince washed-up TV actor host Peter Vincent, who is played perfectly by Roddy McDowall, to help him save his neighborhood from undead gentrification, which is the second worst kind of gentrification. The movie perfectly captured the 80s suburban paranoia about suspicious neighbors while delivering some genuinely impressive vampire effects, courtesy of the team at Richard Edlund's company. Writer-director Tom Holland created a cinematic love letter to classic horror that worked both as genius scares and comedic parody, showing that you could have your blood and drink it too. Plus, it launched a franchise and reminded everyone that vampires were way cooler when they wore suits instead of brooding in high school cafeterias. It was Chris Sarandon's idea to have Jerry eating apples throughout the film. While researching vampire lore, Sarandon looked at information about bats and concluded, hey, Jerry had a lot of fruit bat in his DNA. Hence the apples.
Do you like
Mental
apples?
note, insert clip of Good Will Hunting's How You Like Them Apples.
How do you like them apples?
We're going to dip our toes in 1992 and it's Dead Alive. Before Peter Jackson was making Hobbits walk to volcanoes, he was creating the goriest, most over-the-top zombie movie in human history. Seriously, this thing used over 300 gallons of fake blood, which is more than most slasher franchises combined. We start with Lionel, a mama's boy whose overbearing mother gets bitten by a Sumatran rat monkey, key in on that for later, at the zoo, and transforms into a zombie, kicking off a chain reaction that turns their entire neighborhood into a splatterfest of epic proportions. The film's finale, where Lionel straps on a lawnmower and goes to town on a house full of zombies, is basically the Sistine Chapel of practical gore effects. This scene alone would make Tom Savini weep with pride. Made for $3 million in New Zealand, it's crazy this even exists, but Jackson's dedication, innovation, and genuine affection for zombie cinema created something that was as disgusting as it was absolutely hilarious. Sometimes the best way to honor a genre is to push it so far past its breaking point that it literally becomes art. Peter Jackson paid homage to this film in his version of King Kong. During a scene in the boat, you can see a crate with the words Sumatran rat monkey clearly shown on the side.
I kick ass for the Lord.
You know, us 80s kids totally remember these 11 films that proved the 70s, 80s, and early 90s were absolutely fearless when it came to traumatizing audiences. These bangers went on to be remade, copied, and solidified franchises for years. From Demon Children to Plant Zombies to Houses That Eat People, these movies didn't just push boundaries, they actually created new ones to demolish and then set the remains on fire for good measure. I'd ask here, what remakes do you really think held up? Or what movie from GenX desperately needs to be remade for the first time? Or hell, even again? Drop them in the comments, and I'd be really interested if we all had the same thoughts or came up with some truly random titles we haven't even thought of. Thanks for watching all. I love you. And as always, stay cool.